Hello, this is an analysis by Jake Hoag and Frandy of the documentary Halpate.
Halpate is a documentary filmed and made by the Seminole tribe in the Florida Everglades. Halpate means alligator in the Miccosukee language. It is a 14-minute documentary describing the art form of alligator wrestling performed by Seminole artists. The film includes many different Seminole alligator wrestlers such as Billy Walker, Everett Ashola, James Holt, Clinton Holt, and Trey Burt. Though it is an art form, it is also very dangerous. When an alligator's jaw bites down, it can exert 3,000 pounds of force. The muscles opening the mouth are much weaker and allow for the wrestler to hold the mouth shut, evident by this picture. The alligator wrestlers talk about the heart-pumping thrill of placing their hands or even head inside of the mouth of the alligator. In the documentary, we see firsthand of the dangers when we see and hear about Clinton Holt's experience of placing his head in the mouth of a gator, and it bit down and almost crushed his skull. The documentary highlights the conflicts that alligator wrestling brought them when white people exploited Seminole alligator wrestlers and paid them very little for their dangerous work. Holt talks about how it became romanticized by tourists to watch these Native Americans perform alligator wrestling. The Seminoles even took back their art form and created the FAWC, which is a competition where anyone can fight gators in their own land, which means it isn't for some profit at some white person.
Halpate is a short documentary filmed by The New Yorker and released on YouTube by directors Adam Khalil, who is Mohawk, and Adam Piran, who is Ojibwe. The documentary follows alligator wrestling in the Seminole community, a form of entertainment to many people in the area, but for people in the tribe, who for decades have been putting on shows as a way to feed their families, it's much more significant. The Seminole tribe is known as the Unconquered because they never signed a peace treaty with the United States government, making them the only tribe to not do so in America. The Seminoles were pushed down into the Everglades by settlers and used alligators as a way of food. Throughout the 19th century, they fought 3 separate wars, pushing them further and further back into the Everglades. After the last Indian Wars, being Indian became romanticized. White people would watch Indians be Indians. The settlers saw the way the Seminoles hunted alligators and began to throw money at them. In the early 1900s, Irish immigrant Henry Coppinger began to set up villages throughout southern Florida where Seminoles and Miccosukes would do beadwork and wrestle alligators. The Everglades were being drained, and which deprived the Seminoles of most of their sources of income, such as selling animal pelts, so these shows became the best way for many to make a living. Alligator wrestling then became a major draw for tourism and a way to bring money into the community. This marked the big turning point between catching alligators for food and making a show out of it.
In the documentary, we see the dangerous and precise maneuvers these alligator wrestlers are doing. They first have to pin the mouth shut without getting bit, and have to pin the alligator's body down with their body. For entertainment purposes, they carefully place their hand or even head in the mouth without alerting the alligator's array of tiny sensors in its mouth. We see the dangers of it firsthand when Clinton Holt's head gets caught in the jaws of a gator. Though we see the dangers of it, Halpate also dives into the history of alligator wrestling. In the documentary, they explain how white America slowly took over their land and pushed the Seminoles further south into the Everglades through a series of wars. They were put to work by white people and paid very poorly to wrestle alligators for entertainments of tourists. I think the function of Halpate is to educate people in the art form and the dangers as well as the skill it takes. Another function, I think, is to help people understand the background of alligator wrestling. People probably don't realize they originally performed it for food because of their crappy land that they were stuck with. I think another main purpose was to take back the art form of alligator wrestling. Although they have taken back their art form in practice, people's view on alligator wrestling is still distorted. I know for me, I didn't see alligator wrestling as an art, but just as a dangerous act that crazy indigenous people performed. We viewed similar to other art forms that have been romanticized in white culture, such as painting, music, and other stereotyped art forms. It's similar to other art forms such as music and paintings because, in my opinion, people have distorted views on what it looks like, and when in reality it is something that people with great talents perform and is continually changing. People view it as tourists, where they go and watch Native American wrestle an alligator. They think of it as, oh, let's watch Native American wrestle an alligator, rather than an art form evolving through time. And actually it's something they use to survive in hard times throughout history. I thought the format of the documentary is very engaging because I didn't feel like it was something I had to watch for school, but rather it was something I would watch in my own time for fun. It used thrilling aspects such as someone's head actually getting bitten to convey the real danger of the art form of the wrestling. One of the wrestlers talked about the adrenaline and thrill they get when wrestling. We also get to see what alligator wrestling looks like in present day through competitions put on by the Seminoles in the Big Cypress Reservation called the Freestyle Alligator Wrestling Competition. Overall, I came with a much better understanding of and appreciation for alligator wrestling.
Many of our course themes are reflected in the short film Halpate. In the film, there are many references to colonialism. The Seminole and Miccosukee people were forced into the Everglades as a result of war with colonizers, and then turned to alligators as a way to survive. Alligator wrestling was less showy and more about overpowering and killing the animal to sustain yourself and your family. Colonialism continued to impact the Seminole people when colonizers moved into the farther south and began destroying the environment, which depleted animal populations in the region. The main way that Seminoles made money at this point in time was through trapping and selling the furs and pelts. This meant that Seminoles had to try to adapt to survive in the new circumstances, and as a result, alligator wrestling for showmanship as a means to survive. Unfortunately, this industry was still largely controlled by the colonizers. One of the men in the video mentions Henry Coppinger setting up villages for Native Americans to wrestle alligators for entertainment. Even though alligator wrestling is an industry that helped the Seminole people survive, Henry Coppinger didn't pay them very well and exploited their labor and traditional art for gain. It was never Coppinger's work to market. Even dealing with colonialism, the resistance of the Seminoles is very admirable. The Seminole people have shown resistance by refusing to be defeated, both militarily, economically, and culturally. They have never surrendered. They are the only tribe to never sign a peace treaty. Rather than assimilate, they moved into a harsh area to live, turning to alligator hunting for food. The Seminole people used alligator wrestling as a way to survive for generations. The definition of resistance is the refusal to accept or comply with something, and this perfectly characterizes the way this film describes the history of the Seminole tribe, an absolute unwillingness to yield to the colonizers. This closely ties in with the course theme of cultural identity. One of the main things that the Seminoles resisted was the erasure of their cultural identity. Alligator wrestling and its significance in Seminole culture are alive and well today. Before we had Indian gambling, alligator wrestling is what put food on the table, what put clothes on our back in the day, and I believe we shouldn't forget that. A few of the interviews in the documentary were conducted at an alligator wrestling competition in Big Cypress, which is traditional Seminole land. The focus of the film was, of course, the alligator wrestlers, but watching it, there was also a Seminole guy with alligator-themed painting and a lot of people enjoying it. It definitely seemed like a larger cultural event. Doing alligator wrestling in their own place, the Seminole people are no longer working for a colonizer. They have their own village. As a result, one of the wrestlers in the film pointed out, "This is so important, considering the government gave us shit pieces of land and we thrived on it." The story of alligator wrestling in the Seminole community, coming from living off the roadside doing alligator wrestling shows to now owning a billion-dollar industry within the span of 50 years, is also a prime example of survivance. The freestyle alligator wrestling competition is an inspiring example of how big the industry has become. The competition pulls together people from different tribal nations and non-natives from all over the country who are looking to compete or watch. In a way, the resistance Seminoles showed was really survivance, because nothing could stop them from living life the way they had for generations. I believe this film connected the course themes more than any other piece of expressive culture I've observed over the course of this semester. This could be because I've spent so much time on it, but the themes seem much more interconnected. The 4 themes I observed in this film are all very present in this story. I always viewed the themes as separate ideas that can be found throughout our readings, but this film really made me realize how similar they all are. In a way, the Seminoles resisted losing their culture was by continuing to practice it, eventually transforming an industry that exploited them into one that is empowering and an event that brings the community together. This could also be interpreted as survivance. The alligator wrestling is clearly a very important part of cultural identity, and I would go even further to say that resistance and survivance are part of the Seminole cultural identity as well. The first alligator wrestler they interviewed very proudly called the Seminoles the Unconquered, and that's a trend that is present over the course of the film. The wrestlers are very proud of where the industry is and where it started from. I really appreciate this way Halpate impacted my understanding of our course.
These are our sources. We appreciate all of you for watching.